For everyone out there that thinks, and we see this quite a bit over on social media, Xbox has destroyed itself. Xbox is going under. Xbox is going to become just a publisher, a third party. Well, that's just not recognizing the reality that is the console space. And we have a story today that I think illustrates the reality that it's not just Xbox making certain decisions. And what decisions are those? Well, for instance, Indiana Jones is going to launch exclusively first on Game Pass and Xbox, and then eventually over time move to everywhere else. And that story here is Square Enix. We've talked about Square Enix in the past. We've shown, or Square Enix rather, has shown that, hey, we want to be everywhere. The days of being on just one console are done. We need to expand our audience. PlayStation is going to be moving in that direction. Xbox is not the only one. Xbox is leading, perhaps, but they're not the only one headed in that direction. So let's talk about what a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth director says about Xbox. We'll review it, what it means. Let's also talk about Avowed previews. They're out. They dropped late last week, and they're looking really good. Avowed looks like it may live up to the hype, which is good. This drops next year for Xbox. I think it's February for Xbox, so that's exciting. And then also I had a chance to jump in and play a lot of a lot of Flight Simulator 2024, and I want to give my first impressions review of Flight Simulator. Before we jump into it, though, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. My name is X1 the Gamer. We drop videos like this all the time right here on this channel. We also have a podcast, X1 Daily. The podcast is X1 Daily. If you're listening via the podcast, make sure you leave us a 5-star review, rate, review, and subscribe to us, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It very much helps out. So let's start with this news story. This is VideoGamesChronicle.com. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth director says Xbox is great and wants to see the trilogy on more platforms. This is Naoki Hamaguchi. There we go. Naoki Hamaguchi. He was doing an interview with Games Radar, and he was asked by Games Radar how he felt about the game being released on other platforms. He replied, while there were no announcements to make yet, he wanted to see the remake games appearing on more systems. Here's what he said, quote, in terms of Final Fantasy VII, there's nothing really we can say at the moment, but certainly I do want to bring Final Fantasy VII and the remake series to as many players out there as possible. So we want to create that situation, that environment where more players can play the games in the future, and we want to look in that direction. Hamaguchi also said that while it used to be possible to release a game on a single platform and have players buy that system to play it, that's less the case these days. Interesting. See what he's doing there? That's the reality of the console space in 2025. We're kind of at peak console. So how do you expand from here? And that's what Xbox is doing with Game Pass. That's what Xbox is doing with cloud gaming. That's what Xbox is doing with an Indiana Jones title or a Sea of Thieves title, for instance. Explaining that while in the past publishers could, quote, put out a game in one place and get most of the players coming to that game to play it on that platform, he said, quote, it's so much more diversified now. So I think that's probably why our CEO, Mr. Kiru, made the decision to move more in the direction of multi-platform. That's just the way the industry is going. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is one of several recent PS5 exclusives that have failed to meet Square Enix's sales expectations, leading the publisher to announce its plans to shift to a multi-platform strategy. Although he didn't specifically mention Xbox when saying he wanted to see the Final Fantasy VII Remake series on other platforms, Hamaguchi was then asked for his opinion on Square Enix's multi-platform strategy, to which he praised the Xbox platform. This is just a personal opinion. This is what he said, quote, this is just a personal opinion now, but I've got an Xbox myself. I think it's a great hardware platform. I do like Xbox. He didn't have to say that. He said that, I'm sure, with a nod towards Xbox there for Final Fantasy VII, Final Fantasy Remake. So there you have it. And I just go over this story. There's nothing new here. If you've been paying attention, this is the case. This is what Square Enix has come out and said in the past. But it does illustrate where we're at. We are living through a giant shift in gaming. That's just the reality. Technology is enabling that. The realities of economics is enabling that. The reality of publishers, especially big AAA publishers and studios, needing to get a bigger and bigger audience in order to make these games sustainable long term is dictating this direction in gaming. We are living through a very special time. It's fun to be a part of. The next 5 years is going to look completely different than the last 5 years. This is part of that. You're not going to see, this is the last iteration of the paid exclusives from third parties. I don't think the incentive is there. In fact, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I think that advantage actually lies with Game Pass, and I think it's going to be very hard to compete with it. For instance, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Let's pretend Final Fantasy VII didn't yet launch, that it's launching today. Final Fantasy Rebirth could launch on Game Pass, and it doesn't hurt it as far as an exclusivity deal, because yes, it's on Game Pass. You get some sort of deal there. You get that boosts Game Pass, but that doesn't prevent it from also being on PlayStation. That doesn't prevent it from also being on PC or any other console for that matter. And that's going to be hard to compete with long term. That's the direction it's going. That's the direction the gaming space is going. Would love to know your thoughts on this. Has anybody played Final Fantasy VII? Everyone I know that has played it, the remake here, the Rebirth, says it's fantastic. It looks fantastic. I'm very excited to get this. I actually was going to get this on my PlayStation 5, but now at this point I'm just waiting because I want those achievements for Xbox. So stay tuned for that. I do for a minute though want to go over Flight Simulator and Avowed. Let me actually switch screens here. This is Flight Simulator playing, but let's talk about the Avowed previews. Now, a lot of content creators got their hands on, and a lot of journalists got their hands on the Avowed preview. They got to play a bunch, and almost universally, the talking points behind Avowed are that I had a blast with it. It was a lot of fun to play. I saw, in fact, Dustin Legary of IGN, who seems to have more and more interesting takes, by the way. I just think he is an independent thinker and seems to get the YouTube game really well. And what is the YouTube game? It's having authentic, independent takes. And he really does. And he said, you know how refreshing it is to play an RPG where I can be as evil as I want? And I think first of all, I think that's a direct shot at Dragon Age. Dragon Age doesn't let you do that. But I think that people want in RPGs, you want your choices to matter, and you want to have a flexibility and range in your choices. So I could be as honorable and as noble as I want, and I could be as mean and as evil as I want. And then everything in between. And it looks like Avowed is living up to snuff. People are talking about the combat system, because when you watch videos, the combat system does look a little bit slow. It looks a little bit laggy. It doesn't look super engaging or impactful. And yet everybody is saying that the combat looks fantastic, or it plays fantastic. And actually a few people that got to preview it said as much, like, look, this doesn't do it justice. It feels good. It feels responsive. It feels gritty. It feels impactful. So that's good. Avowed. It's going to launch. It's Xbox Studios. Obsidian is making it. Launching first month or two next year. It does look like it's going to live up to the hype, which is fantastic. Which brings us to my first impressions review here of Flight Simulator 2024. Now, I have one major complaint here, and it's not a major complaint, and you're going to see this in a lot of reviews. The difference between Flight Simulator 2024 and the Flight Simulator from 2020 is the Flight Simulator for 2020 was like 120 gigs plus. It's absolutely huge, and it continues to get added to. Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 is 11 gigabytes. Not big at all. In fact, I was shocked at that. And the reason is it's running and loading most of their assets from the cloud. Now, that's good in that it only takes up 11 gigabytes on my hard drive, especially on the Xbox Series X, where there's limited hard drive space unless you want to pay $200 for expansions there. And that part is fantastic. In fact, I deleted Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020, and I freed up a lot of space on my hard drive as a result. The downside is that you're dependent on cloud working. You're dependent on the servers working. And day one, it had some issues. Day two, it was much better. By the weekend, it seemed to have been fixed. However, my one complaint on Flight Simulator here is running from the cloud, loading times are longer than most other games. There also, while you're in the menu system, there's a lot of jank there. There's a lot of glitching as far as, like, there'll be a scene playing in the background and it's choppy, and that's because it's loading in from the cloud. And even when you jump into the game at first, there's like pop in because it's loading in from the cloud. Once you start flying and stuff, it's a next level experience. I think Flight Simulator is this niche title that is very underrated. There is nobody else doing anything like it out there. There's a new career system inside of Flight Simulator. In fact, what you're watching here on the commercials is challenge mode where you're racing. They added helicopters, so rotary piloting, all different sorts of helicopters there. I'm going through the campaign mode right now where you get your pilot's license, then you do a bunch of missions, you get flight hours in order to unlock your chance for your next degree of pilot license, and so on and so forth. This is the best iteration of Microsoft Flight Simulator that there has been. Hands down, no questions asked. What's going to be amazing, remember, you're using like Bing Maps, I think is what they're using. And so when you load in like to your city or to a city, some are handcrafted. So for instance, like New York City, the Grand Canyon, handcrafted areas. But even my small town here, you can load in, and since it's using Bing Maps, it's amazing to fly over your hometown, to explore it via the air, to go up into the mountains and just fly around. There is nothing quite like this out there. I think it's underrated. I think this fills a need in Game Pass that nobody else has. It's an offering that nobody else has, and it's amazing. If you've not played Flight Simulator, I would highly recommend you give it a test. Again, it's 11 gigabytes. It might be 12 gigabytes now. It's 11 gigabyte download, so it's not huge. It's on Game Pass. It is a little bit tedious in that you gotta learn how to fly. And I wouldn't use the word tedious, but it does take some time. I would highly recommend going through the training, the tutorials. It's very helpful just to get you initially off the ground and running. But I am loving it. The only thing is, I can't wait for them to get the cloud part figured out better. And I wish there was an option, hey, I want to play in the cloud, or hey, I'm willing to download 300 gigabytes to have incredibly fast load screens. Like, that option would be nice to have. It's not there right now. Maybe in the future we get it. But that's my thoughts. Microsoft Flight Simulator, first impressions there. Overall, it's a start to a great week. Thank you very much, guys, for tuning in. That's going to leave us there. Let me know what your thoughts are. Have you had a chance to play Flight Simulator yet? Let me know in the comments below. What do you think about Avowed? Are you excited for Avowed? Will you be jumping into it? Again, let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel. My name is X1 the Gamer. We drop videos like this all the time. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.